Am I wrong for not telling my friend's wife that he is my sperm donor? I'm a 30-year-old asexual woman who is currently 33 weeks pregnant with twin girls that I conceived through IVF. I have always wanted children but never really considered them on the cards for me due to my sexuality, but now I'm in a position where I felt stable enough to bring a child into the world on my own, so I decided to go through IVF. My best friend since high school, 31 male, found out about my plan and how I was looking into finding a donor so it wouldn't be anonymous and I can find the medical history, etc. And he offered to be the sperm donor. At least I would know his medical history and any risk there would be attached. I agreed but made it very clear he wouldn't have a parental role in this child's life and at most he'd be an honorary uncle due to our friendship. He was happy to agree to this, and it never once occurred to me that he would offer this without running it by his wife first, 31 female. As some of you will likely be worried, I use an HFEA clinic, which is a legally licensed clinic, which means due to the paperwork signed when I underwent IVF, he has no legal right or obligations towards the babies, which is what both of us wanted going into this. The IVF was successful as my pregnant state proves, a little too successful perhaps as its twins. I recently took my friend and his wife out to dinner to thank them for doing this for me and celebrate being in the 3rd trimester, but his wife was confused when I explained the reason for the dinner and then angrily demanded to know why he kept this from her, and I was just as shocked and asked my friend if he hadn't told his wife. He tried to explain to both of us that he hadn't thought it mattered as he has no rights to the babies. His wife got even angrier at that part, stating she isn't comfortable with their son, 6 male, having siblings that aren't really his siblings, and she wants that part changed so that her husband has a legal say over the girls. I was in shock over this, but said I wouldn't be doing that as I wanted to raise them alone. The 3 of us got into a huge argument and his wife demanded to know why I wouldn't tell her that her husband had offered this in the first place. I feel really guilty for not checking with his wife first, but it honestly never occurred to me that he wouldn't have done that first, so I thought if he was offering, she'd have to already given the okay. Am I the asshole in this? I don't know what to do.
I, 38 female, am in a weird situation with my boyfriend, 40 male, and his friend, 40 female. My boyfriend has had a very, very hard year. A few months ago, his mom got very sick. One night after work, he went out drinking with a couple of guys from work. We lived together and were in the process of packing up. Well, I was, because we were moving to a new place the following week. I was packing until close to midnight when he texted me. He said he had drank too much and just couldn't deal with getting an Uber and asked if I would pick him up 45 minutes away. Of course, I said yes. When I got to the bar, I texted him and he said he'd be out in a minute. Some girl came out and came over to the car and introduced herself to me. She said she was his very good friend. I knew her name because she'd gone to high school with him years ago, but I didn't even know that they were still in contact. And thanked me profusely for coming to pick him up because he wasn't in any shape to take an Uber. That seemed a bit odd to me because of course I'd pick him up, he's my partner. Anyway, we chatted for a minute and I apologized for my appearance, basically sweaty from packing all evening. I told her that I'd been packing for hours. She asked me if I was moving and I told her yes, we were moving to a new place next week. She seemed slightly confused, but she'd also been drinking, so I ignored that. It almost felt like she thought I was just his buddy that was kind enough to come pick him up. Meanwhile, I'm his partner. Fast forward to his mom's funeral a few weeks later. She was there and she came up to me and apologized for not being available to help him more to plan the funeral and to be his support. I told her that it was okay, no problem, but I was also thinking, huh? We didn't really need any help or support, but whatever, I thought she was just trying to be nice. A few weeks later, I noticed on Facebook that I could see him responding to someone in a thread, but I couldn't see who he was talking to. I asked him and he said that he was talking to her. I couldn't see her replies because she had blocked me. I use social media extensively for work and I know how it works, obviously. I told him that she'd blocked me, he texted her and asked her if she had, and she lied. As soon as he asked her, she unblocked me. I told him that it was very strange and he said, nah, it's obviously some glitch. Okay, whatever. Then a week later, I noticed the same thing and realized that she blocked me again. I honestly have no clue what to think about all this. It all seems very, very odd. She also mailed him a copy of an old high school yearbook. I asked him why and he said he wasn't sure, but I do realize he had to have given her his address. But also, he never even mentioned her to me previously, but meanwhile, he'd been out drinking with her. And there were guys from work there as well. Does this seem strange to anyone else? I don't want to create a thing out of nothing, especially when he's been dealing with so many issues, but I'll have to admit that it all leaves me feeling strange.
Storytime about my extremely creepy neighbors. So a little background information, I was 12 years old and I was in 6th grade, and my family and I lived in a really small town where everyone knew everyone. But our new neighbors had been building their house next to us for the past 4 years. And finally, when they were done with the house, this house was huge. I mean, probably because there were like 8 people moving into the house. There was the mom, the dad, 4 kids, and their grandparents. So like 8 people. But I was super excited because I was like, okay, this is awesome. I get to meet some new friends. But after 2 weeks of not seeing anybody playing in the backyard or anybody on the school bus, I started to think that their family was super fucking weird. And everyone in our neighborhood liked to gossip, and everyone was saying how they barely see the people who had just moved in. So my mom decided to take one for the team and make some brownies, take them over to the house, and I ended up going with her. So we go up to the house, we knock on the door, and one of the kids came and opened the door, but the dad ran went over and grabbed him. So like I said, my mom and I took some brownies over there, and one of the kids opened the door, and when he opened the door, he had a bunch of bruises all over his body. The dad came running over and ripped his son from the door and slammed the door in our faces, and all you could hear was him screaming at his son. So my mom and I went to walk away before the door opened, and he was like, sorry, my son knows better than to open the door to strangers. So he took the brownies, and then I asked him if I could have a sleepover with one of his daughters, and he was super hesitant at first, but he said that I could only have a sleepover with her if it was at my house and not theirs, which my mom was completely fine with anyways, because she thought that it was a little bit weird that his son had bruises covering his whole body. So that night when she came over to sleep over my house, I asked her how her brother got all those bruises all over his body, and she said that he just fell down some stairs. But after that, we became best friends, and we would literally hang out like 5 times a week, until the one day I knocked on their door to ask if she wanted to come over, and her dad answered the door and said that she was gone. So like I said, I became best friends with their daughter, but the one day I went over her house to ask if she wanted to come over, and her dad answered the door and said that she was gone. And when I asked when she would be back, he was like, she went to go live with her mom, so probably never. Which was super weird because she never mentioned that she had another mom. So fast forward 2 months, my family and I are sitting around the fire pit when we hear someone scream help. But we weren't sure if that's what we were actually hearing because it was so quiet, and then all of a sudden we heard someone banging on my neighbor's basement door. You know those metal doors that people usually have outside of their house that lead down basement steps? Yeah, well that's where the banging was coming from, so my dad hopped over the fence to see if that's where the screaming was coming from also, and then not even a minute later my dad hopped back over the fence and it looked like he saw a ghost, but he ran inside, called 911. Because I was so young, the only thing my parents told me about that whole situation was that the girl that I was friends with was still alive and her parents were keeping her in the basement along with 2 of her other siblings. But then we also found out that they weren't even her real parents. They were kidnapped at the hospital when they were born.
My son told me what my husband does when I'm not home. Hank, can you run down to the basement and fetch me some more flour? I asked my son, who had just come downstairs for breakfast. He plopped down onto one of the kitchen chairs and shook his little head. No, he muttered, I can't. I craned my neck to look at him from the pancake mix bubbling on the stove. He seemed fidgety and pale, not at all like his usual self. Why not? He stared at me, his eyes wide. There are ghosts in the basement, Mom. Oh, don't be silly, I chuckled. Ghosts aren't real, sweetheart. Or even if they are, they live in very old, abandoned houses. Much older than ours. Hank was silent, watching me as I poked at the batter in the pan. That's not true, is it? His voice was earnest and eerily calm, sending chills crawling up my spine. Of course, it's true. I assured him, think about it. What is a ghost? Hank thought for a moment, someone who's dead? I nodded, exactly. And no one has died in our house. We bought it brand new last year, remember? So, we can't have ghosts. How do you know? My heart skipped a beat and I turned to look at him again. For a 7-year-old, Hank was an incredibly deep thinker, a quality that had the capacity both to impress and to unnerve. How do I know what? How do you know that no one has died in our house? I tapped the spatula on the edge of the pan, trying to gather my scattered thoughts. Well, wouldn't we know if anyone had? Hey, darling, could you run down and get that flour, please? These pancakes are breaking apart. There was a pause. No, Mom. I sighed impatiently. Hank, your dad's downstairs. The lights will be on. Go on, there's no ghost, trust me. But Hank sat there, kicking his legs under the table, visibly uncomfortable. This had never been a problem in the past, and I couldn't think of any reason for it, aside from some silly horror story his friends might have told him at school. Look, how about I call Dad to come get you, I said, making my way towards the basement door, though. No, Mom, don't. Hank jumped to his feet, dashing after me and gripping the hem of my apron. Don't call Dad. Why? His eyes welled up with tears. I don't like him. I stared at him, taken aback. You don't like him? Why? He's a bad person. What? How can you say such a thing? He stuck out his bottom lip. He's very angry. He's not angry, sweetheart. What makes you say that? Well, Hank sounded hesitant. Yesterday, after school, I went down to the basement to ask for some help with the pasta, and he was yelling at the lady. And then he hit her. I froze. What pasta? What lady? I put my hands on his shoulders and kneeled in front of him. Hank, can you tell me what happened? My husband was a stay-at-home dad and normally spent his time tinkering in the garage. His only responsibilities were keeping the house tidy and taking care of Hank after school. I always worked late and usually came home long after my son went to bed. Dad always has a new lady in the basement when I come home from school. I'm not allowed to go down there, but I hear them. He says I have to get my own dinner, but last night I forgot to turn off the stove and some water got on my arm. He pulled up his right sleeve, revealing a large area of scorched skin on his forearm. I stared at it, and then at my son in bewilderment, my throat closing up, and then I went downstairs to tell Dad, but he was busy with the lady. He got really angry when he saw me. I didn't know what to say. My heart was thumping fast in my chest, making me feel lightheaded. What happened to the lady, Hank? I whispered. He wet his lips. She lives in the basement now. They all do. My blood ran cold. Stay here. I'm going to talk to your father. No. Hank grabbed my sleeve. You can't go, Mum. I have to, baby. Don't worry, the ghosts won't get me. I just need to find out what's going on. No, you can't go, he kept repeating, frantically tugging at my blouse. Dad said you're not supposed to know about last night. I stared at him. What? This is important, Hank, your father is supposed to be taking care of you. Hank crumpled to the floor, burying his face in his little hands. I'm afraid, he sniffled, I'm afraid that if you tell him, he'll make me return to my grave.
My dad's cousin just discovered he has a 30-year-old daughter that his mother kept from him.
Oh.
About 100 years ago, right after World War I, my great-grandparents settled on a farm. My great-grandfather wanted to rebuild and repopulate the country after the terrible war. They had 12 children and ran a prosperous farm supporting about 50 people, the pride and joy of the family. So many years later, the first boy of those 12 children inherited the farm. Let's call him C. He is my grandma's older brother. C married a woman named B, and together they had 5 children. The firstborn was named S, and he was destined to take over the farm. When he was around 18 to 20 years old, S had a serious relationship with a girl named G, whom he planned to marry. B didn't approve of this girl, and G was not from a good enough family for her beloved first son, and S was about to inherit a wealthy farm. G was not to get her hands on the son nor the farm. B managed to have them break up, and if I remember correctly, she convinced G to go away, and S never heard from her again. He wrote her many letters, but G never replied, and after a while, he stopped writing. So the years passed and many things happened, as in every family. I don't know the exact details, but S became alcoholic and never took over the farm. It went to his younger brother, E, who tried to help S as best as he could and employed him on the farm when possible. S lives alone in a small apartment nearby, never married, and overall did not have a great life.
Damn.
The mom, B, also became alcoholic. Apparently, it happened around the time S got better with his own alcoholism. And that brings us to last year when B died. At this point, C was old and very diminished. He had some kind of dementia and needed around-clock care. So it was decided to never tell him what I'm about to tell you.
Ooh.
A few months after B's death, someone decided to finally clean up B's room. On top of a big wardrobe, they found a box full of letters, all open and addressed to S. S didn't know what it was, but came by to pick them up. He recognized instantly the handwriting on the envelopes. It was G's, his girlfriend from 30 years ago.
No.
He took the box and went home in quite a turmoil. He didn't touch it for 2 weeks, not knowing what to do. He finally decided to throw them away without reading them. A few weeks later, he was still mulling over this. He finally decided to look G up on the internet and found her. He contacted her and she agreed to meet her at her place, 300 kilometers away. They spent the afternoon talking and talking. After a while, as it was getting dark, she invited him to stay over at dinner. So he ate with G and with D, a 30-ish-year-old woman who was also invited. In the middle of dinner, she suddenly turned around and said, D, this is your dad. S, meet your daughter. So what happened was that 30 years ago, B was determined to keep G from her son, and she intercepted every letter G sent. In these letters, G was telling S she found out she was pregnant from him. The letters were open, so B knew all about it. So obviously, G never heard anything from S. There was no social media at that time, so after a few months of the silent treatment, she accepted that she would raise her child alone and stopped writing. She was not married and had to face the stigma of being a single mother. D grew up without a dad. She thought he abandoned her and also had to face the stigma. And for 30 years, B knew all about it, and even on her deathbed, she never said anything.
Am I the asshole for leaving in the middle of a celebration because of the toast my husband gave? I, 25-year-old female, married my husband, 31-year-old male, 3 years ago. I am currently pregnant with our first baby together. We found out it's a girl, and my in-laws wanted to invite us for a dinner for a gender reveal announcement and celebration. We got there, saw many relatives coming to congratulate us and celebrate. It was bigger than expected, which made me nervous because I'm not a fan of being around many people. We sat at the dinner table and I barely ate. I was feeling so much anxiety and was sort of upset. My husband didn't warn me about how many people were coming, but I tried to stay calm and collected. After the announcement and in the middle of the celebration, my husband wanted to give a toast. He opened a bottle and poured a drink and wished that our daughter would be happy, healthy, but looked nothing like me. Everyone at the table laughed. I sat there staring in shock while he kept laughing with them. I felt so much rage and anxiety, and it was getting out of hand. I got up, took my purse, and made my way out. His mom followed me, asking if I was okay. I told her I just wanted to go home. He came to the door asking what was wrong. That's when we started arguing. He said this was a joke toast and that my reaction was over the top. But the thing is, ever since I got pregnant, he kept hinting he doesn't want our daughter to look like me. He even once got up in the morning and the first thing he told me was how much he wished our daughter looked nothing like me. It hurt me while I'm already dealing with low self-esteem and anxiety. I wanted to go home, but he said I was being a baby and that I should learn to take a joke. I said he made everyone laugh at me, but he defensively said it didn't warrant me walking out on dinner and being so disrespectful to the relatives who came to celebrate and share our joy. I went home and he called me many times telling me to get my insecurities in check before I pass them on to our daughter. He urged me to get therapy and stop acting so dramatically like how I did in front of his family. I think leaving dinner wasn't the best solution, but I just got overwhelmed. So am I the asshole?
Girl, shut up. Close the door. We gotta be discreet today. So the other day I went on a date with a detective, okay? Now, I know what you're thinking. You're like, Marie, the police. I didn't know he was a cop when I gave him my number. He tricked me because he was cute and he smelled good. And in my mind, cops don't smell good. In my mind, cops smell like the little bologna that's in the Lunchables box, you know? I think that they all use like a 5-in-1 shampoo, conditioner, body wash, lube, toothpaste. So when I met him, he smelled good and I was like, oh, okay, 718. Yeah, you could take it down. That's how I was bamboozled. But he said he was a detective, and I was like, yuck. And then he was like, Special Victims Unit. And I was like, just like that, you back in the game. Like Ice-T, like Olivia Benson. What cases we working on? And then we spent the rest of the day working on some cases, okay? But I don't think I'm going to see him again. I can't date a detective. He's going to know when I'm lying. And I do that sometimes. It's fun, right? Sometimes I lie for good. But like, what if I spend the night at his house, right? The detective and I. Let's flash forward a couple of months, couple of weeks. And I'm spending the night at his house and, I'm trying to creep back in the bed because I don't want to disturb him. He had a long weekend and he freaks out and he don't recognize me because I got a bonnet on and he shoots my big toe off. Now I got 9 toes because I dated a detective one time. Absolutely not.